I'll introduce this section by telling you a quick story of, again, a nice group of students that I met in Swindon about 4 or 5 years ago. And as we were talking about this, one student said, look, now that I'm training to be a teacher, I've got to be careful about, what I do in my private life. And I said, really? And he said, yeah. And I said, why? He said, well, when I was doing my degree, I did a degree in maths in Bristol. And to be honest with you, I like drinking. So I was always out. If I had money, I'd be going to the pub every night. At weekends, I'd be going pubbing and clubbing. And sometimes I'd come home really legless and, sometimes out my face. He said, I can't do that now. I'm in a small town outside of Swindon, and sometimes I even see my year 11s and 12s in the pub. And, I couldn't be seen coming home, staggering home from a late night in a club or a pub with the small community in the school near the school where I work. And another guy on the table said, well, why don't you make sure that you socialize well away from your workplace? Keep your private life private, which is very good advice, actually. And he said, look, you're not a teacher 24 hours a day. It's a hard job. You're going to need to keep a balance in your private and your professional life. And you're going to need to let off steam sometimes and, just have a good time. You're a young person. Socialize well away from where you work if you can. Now that is, as I say, very good advice. But then he went on, rather interestingly, I thought, because he said, look, I don't drink a lot, but I do like to smoke a little bit of weed sometimes, and I do that in the privacy of my own home. Sometimes with friends, sometimes I'm alone. He said, but nobody knows about it. No, most people don't even know that I smoke weed. I just do it in private, and I don't see what the problem is there. I'm not selling drugs to the kids. I just like smoking a bit of weed to relax at the weekend. And if I'm a good teacher, I don't see why that's got to do with anybody else. And another student on his group on the table said, well, of course it has. Of course it's got something to do with other people. And he said, how? Why? I don't understand why. And she said, it's illegal, you idiot. Don't you realize smoking weed is illegal? And he actually had a very interesting comeback to her. He said, what, have you never done anything wrong? Never. Have you never, driven down the motorway at 80 or 90 miles an hour? Have you never jumped an amber light? Have you never parked on a double yellow line? Have you never paid off your car mechanic in cash to avoid the VAT? I felt a bit nervous about that myself when he said it, but never mind. He's got a fantastic challenge to us all, hasn't he? Because what he's saying is, if I'm a good teacher, what I do in my private life is none of your business. Thank you very much. Now, what I'd like to do is for you to look at some of these issues that you'll see on screen now. Does it matter if you do these things, as long as you're a good teacher? And you can consider each one of those scenarios in turn.